So you want to add some content to a page. Yes, you can add content to a page very easily with jQuery. Assume you have a page with some simple HTML. It's got a div with an ID of container and a div and h2 tag inside of it. And as the user does things, you want to change the content of the errors ID to reflect what's going on with the page. Say they're filling out a form and they forget something or whatever. So you can retrieve the HTML that's currently inside the selection. Just add .html after the jQuery selection. So if we want to return through an alert dialog box the HTML of the errors ID, then you would use this construct that's at the top there in red. You can make a copy of the HTML inside a specific element and paste it into another element on a page, for instance. Now the code creates an alert box with the text h2 errors in it, and if you supply a string as an argument to the HTML method, you replace the current contents. Instead of just reading them and using them, you can replace them if you put something in the parentheses. So here we're going to say, hey, there are 4 errors in this form, and it's going to replace all of the HTML in the errors ID, at least the div that has the errors ID here, with there are 4 errors. What this looks like as a result is this. And it just replaced all that. It's like enter HTML in the normal JavaScript command that we've been using in our first example this week. So .html is kind of the jQuery version of this. If you just wanted to change the text, not worry about HTML tags, you can use the .text method. It doesn't accept HTML tags, so you want to target a tag that just has content in it. Here it's specifically targeting the h2 tag that's a descendant of the errors ID. If you remember from CSS, the first selector there, the hash errors, is an ID. The space means it's going to be a descendant selector of h2. So any h2 that is a descendant of the errors ID. It's worth remembering some of the CSS selectors every now and then if you don't use them every day. So again, text, it will replace stuff if you give it a string to replace it with. So instead of having an h2 with errors in it, we might want to put no errors found. Give them some positive feedback. So here's what that looks like. Once you execute that jQuery.text with no errors found, it'll replace the text in the h2 tag. Really pretty neat. If you want to add things on the beginning or the end of your element, you can use the append or prepend command. Say you want to select a div tag, but instead of replacing the contents, you just want to add some stuff at the end or right before the closing div tag. Append is a great way just to add stuff at the end of a bulleted list, so you can kind of extend your unordered list or your ordered lists and add and subtract things to them. Append, here we go. So if we take this and append, there are 4 errors in this form to the ID of errors. Let's see what that looks like. Boom, it puts it right at the end there. But again, like I said before, if you want to put it at the beginning instead of at the end, you would use prepend. So here, append is adding an HTML element as the last child element of the selected element. That is a mouthful. If you want to pause here and think about it, that's cool. It's just there's a little bit of an adjustment when you start thinking descendants and children and siblings and stuff. So take your time. Here we're going to prepend, which is just like append, but adds it directly after the opening tag or right at the beginning of the selection. If we want to prepend the same thing, 4 errors in this form, onto the ID of errors, here's what it would look like as a result at the end. Just think of this as the beginning, prepending, appending at the end. You could also use before or after, which would put things before your selection in the DOM or after your selection in the DOM. It puts it before your opening tag and after your closing tag, as opposed to inside your selection, which is what append and prepend do. Let's look at an example. It makes more sense when you see it. Say we have some input with a type equal text, and we want to add some stuff after it. Say in a form, you want somebody forgot to put in their name in the name field, and they click the submit button, and you want to come back and give them some feedback that says, hey, the username is required. You could add this after that element in the DOM to give them some feedback and say, hey, your username is required. So for instance, here we're taking that same input, we're saying after, and we're going to see that it put that text right there. Little takes getting used to. Now the functions in this section, HTML, text, and stuff and such, are the most popular ways of adding and altering content to a page, but they're not the only ones. You can find a whole bunch more. You'd be shocked at how many there are, but a whole more functions that work with jQuery at that URL. So you ought to go check it out at some point. Now if you want to remove things, you can remove them. Just make a selection and say go away with the .remove method. So if we wanted to take away the error message, we would just say remove, and boom, there it's gone. You can replace one thing with another with the replace with command. So we're taking the selection of product 21 and replacing it with some text added to cart. Just be very careful as you're looking and working with your DOM in a browser, because there's a difference between your first source that you created, your HTML source code that was your web page, and the generated source when you manipulated the DOM with JavaScript. There's a difference in the way the HTML looked when you first started and all the manipulations you have done. In the web developers plugin for Firefox, you can view the original source and you can view the generated source. And comparing those two is really instructive when you get into gnarly situations and are trying to figure out what has happened to the DOM. So let's pause here